Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I bought a peaceful lakeside cabin to escape the chaos. What I got was a turf war with the most controlling HOA queen in town. She said my driveway was community property. Then came the fake fines, hired goons, and forged maps. Big mistake, Karen. This is my land. Let the war begin. I've always believed that peace isn't something you find. It's something you build. For me, that peace came in the form of a run-down little lakeside house I'd been eyeing for years. It wasn't much by suburban standards, peeling paint, a crooked porch, weeds climbing up the fence, but I saw potential, a promise. After years of dealing with the corporate rat race and a never-ending carousel of noisy neighbors, I was ready to trade in my downtown condo for something real. And this was it, a secluded lot on the edge of a pine-lined lake with its own little dock, a weathered gazebo, and a gravel patch just wide enough for my pickup, and maybe a small boat trailer. It felt like I'd finally made it. I closed on the property in early spring. My wife Samantha and I moved in a few days later with nothing but a mattress, a toolbox, and the kind of foolish optimism that makes you think replacing a roof can be a weekend job. The moment we stepped out of the truck, the scent of pine hit us like a breath of fresh life. Birds were chirping, the lake shimmered in the distance, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. And then, 3 days in, it happened. I was sipping coffee on the porch, planning out fence posts in my head, when I noticed a crisp white envelope tucked into our mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Just the HOA logo and the kind of overly formal font that screams, "We'd like to ruin your day." Curious and a little amused, I opened it. But what I read wiped the smile clean off my face. You are in violation of community parking regulations by placing your vehicle on HOA maintained service space. You are hereby instructed to remove your vehicle from this area immediately. My truck was parked exactly where the property survey said it should be, right next to my house, on my own gravel patch, which was clearly marked within my lot on every deed, map, and plat I'd been handed at closing. I stared at the letter, reread it twice, and then laughed under my breath. Must be a mistake. Surely someone got confused. Maybe the HOA just hadn't updated their boundaries or didn't realize I wasn't part of the subdivision next door. I mean, my property wasn't in any HOA. That was a big part of why I bought it. My real estate agent had made it crystal clear. This parcel is not part of Lakeside Meadows HOA. It stands alone, free of any HOA governance. Still, I decided to play nice. I called the number listed at the bottom of the letter. No answer. I left a polite voicemail explaining who I was, where I lived, and asking for clarification. That same evening, my wife and I took a short walk through the neighborhood, just to get a sense of who our new neighbors were. We passed through the fancy gate marking the start of Lakeside Meadows. White fencing, uniform flower beds, kids riding overpriced scooters, and I'll admit, it looked like a commercial for a homeowner's dream. And then we saw her. Karen Trimble, HOA president, self-declared queen of the block, and judging by her expression, a woman who had been personally offended by my very existence. She was standing at the end of her pristine stone walkway, arms folded across a salmon-colored cardigan, watching us like a guard dog with pearls. And I had a feeling this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the opening move in a game I didn't know I'd been invited to. The next morning, I didn't bother with coffee. I grabbed the property survey, the deed, and my patience, what was left of it, and made my way down to the HOA office. It was nestled inside what looked like a miniature town hall at the front of the Lakeside Meadows neighborhood. Faux brick, American flag flapping heroically in the breeze, flower beds trimmed with military precision. Cute. And fake as a plastic lawn flamingo. Inside, the air conditioning was set to Arctic winter, and the receptionist gave me a smile so tight it might have cracked porcelain. I politely asked if Karen Trimble was in. She didn't even blink before responding with, "She's expecting you." I raised an eyebrow. Expecting me? I hadn't mentioned I was coming. Seconds later, the door behind the desk opened, and there she was. Karen in the flesh. Immaculate, tall, with that aggressive suburban elegance that screamed control freak in designer shoes. Her face lit up with that kind of smile reserved for when a cat finally corners the bird. "Mr. Clark," she said smoothly, "let's talk about your situation. Her office looked like a Pinterest board had exploded, everything coordinated, pastel, and unnecessarily scented. She motioned for me to sit, and I did, placing the documents squarely on the table. "I think there's been a mistake," I began. "Your HOA left this notice in my mailbox." I tapped the letter. "But my lot isn't part of Lakeside Meadows. See here, property line ends before the curb, and the gravel pad is fully within my boundaries." Karen didn't even glance at the papers. She tilted her head slightly and said, "I know it's technically yours. That's not the issue." I blinked. "Then, what is?" She clasped her hands together, her voice syrupy and patronizing. "You have to understand that gravel area has been used by Lakeside Meadows residents for years. For visiting guests, boat trailers, event overflow, 15 years of unspoken community access. We've maintained it. We've cared for it. So while your paperwork may say it's yours, in spirit, it belongs to the community." I nearly choked on air. "In spirit?" "Yes," she said firmly, as if explaining it to a slow child. "It's a matter of shared value and neighborhood tradition. Everyone here views it as common space. You moving in doesn't change that." I leaned back slowly. "So, you're telling me that because people got used to parking on a piece of land they didn't own, it's now theirs?" "Well," she smiled thinly, "it would be very unfortunate if your actions created tension within the community, especially this early in your time here." There it was. The threat, disguised in sweetness, but sharp as a rusty nail. Not a legal claim, not a neighborly request, just a thinly veiled intimidation tactic. "Karen," I said slowly, "you can dress this up in HOA language and floral-scented diplomacy, but let me be clear, you're talking about trespassing. I bought this land. I pay taxes on it. No one, not you, not your guests, not your tradition, has a legal right to park there." Her expression hardened for just a second before the mask came back. "I see. Well, I'm sorry you've chosen to be difficult. We do value harmony here in Lakeside Meadows." She stood, signaling the end of our little theater performance. I stood too, meeting her gaze. "Good," I said. "Then I'm sure you'll have no trouble respecting my property lines." As I turned to leave, she added, almost casually, "Just be careful, Mr. Clark. When newcomers disrupt things, sometimes things get messy." I didn't respond. But as I walked back across the lot, past manicured hedges and rows of identical mailboxes, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot, and I had the sinking feeling I hadn't seen the worst of Karen yet. 2 days. That's how long the uneasy silence lasted. For 48 blessed hours, there were no letters, no visits, no passive-aggressive glares from Karen as I drove past her perfectly symmetrical begonias. I even started to think maybe she'd backed down, maybe the deed, the survey, and a good dose of logic had done the trick. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, to find my truck completely covered in bright orange flyers, taped to every window and windshield wiper. I pulled one off. It read, "Notice of violation. Parking on HOA designated utility zone is prohibited. Repeat offenses will result in further action." There were 5 more just like it, all with HOA letterhead, all signed again by Karen Trimble. I hadn't even finished cursing when I noticed something even worse. The chain. Someone, no, not someone, the HOA, had wrapped a heavy-duty metal chain across my gate, padlocked it shut like I was some kind of squatter. Hanging from it was a laminated tag, "Restricted Access, HOA Maintenance Zone." I didn't even have time to process it before I heard the sound of boots crunching gravel behind me. 2 men in black polo shirts, both with Lakeside security stitched in gold thread over their left chest, were standing near the driveway. One was tall, bald, with a jaw like a cement mixer and arms crossed tight enough to crack walnuts. The other was shorter, red-faced, holding what looked like a clipboard and a walkie-talkie. "Morning," I said, walking toward them slowly. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The bald one nodded. "We've been instructed to restrict vehicle access to this zone until the matter is resolved." I let out a breath. "You mean my driveway? On my property?" "Per HOA directive," the shorter one cut in. "This area is part of the neighborhood's auxiliary infrastructure. You'll need to cease use immediately." I walked right up to the chain, rattled it, and then turned to face them. "You've got 10 seconds to get this off my gate before I call the cops. This is private land. You're trespassing." Baldy took a step forward. "No need to escalate, sir." "Too late," I snapped. You chained my driveway shut like I'm a condemned building." Then it happened. As I reached for the padlock, the bald guy, without warning, grabbed my arm. Reflex kicked in. I yanked back, shoved him off. He slipped, one boot catching on the gravel, and hit the ground with a grunt. The red-faced one lunged forward, shouting something. I turned, dodged, pure instinct, and before I knew it, I'd driven a clean elbow right into his gut. He staggered, coughed, doubled over. "Enough!" A voice screamed. My wife Samantha burst out the front door, phone already in her hand. "I'm calling the police. You're attacking him on his own property." Redface tried to stand tall. "Ma'am, we were enforcing regulations." "You're going to be enforcing restraining orders if you don't back off," she snapped. I stood there, fists clenched, adrenaline buzzing like bees under my skin. The bald guy was still on the ground, trying to save face. The other one was trying not to puke on my boots. And I'd officially had it. The HOA had crossed a line. This wasn't just bureaucracy anymore. This was war. Time slowed down. I stood there, gravel crunching under my boots, staring at the chain stretched across my own damn gate like some kind of medieval drawbridge. My truck sat helplessly behind it, covered in HOA violation flyers fluttering in the breeze like battle flags in enemy territory. The two self-appointed sentinels from Karen's private HOA militia hadn't moved. One was still clutching his side from the gut shot I'd instinctively delivered. The other was brushing himself off, doing a bad job pretending he hadn't just eaten driveway dust in front of my hydrangeas. And yet, somehow, they were still standing their ground like this was their kingdom, and I was the trespasser. But this was my castle. I moved toward the gate again. "You have about 10 seconds to get that chain off," I said through gritted teeth. "Or it's coming down with or without your permission." "Sir," the bald one said, tone low, steady, and condescending, "this is now an active enforcement zone. We've been authorized to maintain position until the HOA board convenes." I stared at him. "Did Karen give you that authorization in a tiara and velvet robe?" That didn't go over well. He stepped forward again, chest puffed like a bull about to charge. "You need to step back." "You need to get off my property," I snapped, squaring my stance. And that's when things exploded. Without warning, he reached forward and shoved me. Not hard, but enough to tip the balance. Enough to say, "I'm in charge here." Big mistake. I swung, clean, practiced, and hit him square in the jaw. His head jerked sideways with a satisfying crack, and for a moment, his eyes went glassy. Redface behind him screamed, "Assault!" like he was auditioning for Law and Order, and lunged at me again. I pivoted, ducked under his flailing arms, grabbed his polo collar, and yanked him forward into the chain, which clanged like a church bell. He ricocheted off it and landed in the garden bed, face first into my wife's prized lilies. And then, sirens. It was like someone hit play on an action movie. Red and blue lights whipped across the driveway as the sheriff's cruiser skidded to a stop in front of my property. The driver's door flew open, and out stepped Officer Delgado, one hand on his holster, the other raised. "Everybody freeze." I raised my hands instantly. "I live here. I called you. My wife called. These guys are not law enforcement. They chained my driveway and attacked me." Baldy tried to speak, but Delgado shut him down. "On the ground. Now." "Both of you." They complied, grudgingly, but it was clear from their expressions they hadn't expected to end the day face down on my gravel. A second cruiser arrived, then a third. Lights flashing, radios buzzing, neighbors peeking out from behind their blinds like nosy prairie dogs. And, of course, right on cue, Karen Trimble pulled up in her luxury SUV, wearing a flowing silk blouse and the kind of sunglasses that cost more than my washer-dryer set. She stepped out like she was walking onto a red carpet, arms raised slightly as if calming the press. "Officers, please, this is all a misunderstanding. These men were simply explaining the HOA's position." Delgado wasn't buying it. "Your men chained off private property and initiated physical contact with the homeowner. That's not a misunderstanding, ma'am. That's trespassing and battery." Karen's smile faltered. "Surely we can settle this civilly." He cut her off. "Civil court will get its turn. Right now, you and your security team are coming with us." They cuffed the two guys while Karen's jaw flapped open like a lawn chair in a windstorm. She wasn't arrested yet, but she was issued a citation for unlawful enforcement activity and was told in no uncertain terms to stay away from my property. I watched as her perfect suburban empire cracked just a little, and as the cruisers pulled away, I looked down at the broken flower bed, the snapped chain, and the now quiet gravel drive. I'd won the battle, but the war, oh, that was still coming. If Karen thought being slapped with a citation would be the end of it, she didn't know me very well. After the stunt with the chain and her budget bodyguards, I wasn't just angry, I was activated. Whatever passive patience I'd brought to this neighborhood had been paved over like an old sidewalk. This wasn't a petty squabble anymore. This was an assault on my rights as a property owner, and I was done playing defense. My first move. I called Gina Morton, a razor-sharp real estate attorney with the personality of a smiling buzzsaw. She reviewed the documents, photos, videos, and HOA notices I'd compiled and said the words I'd been dying to hear. You've got them. Trespass, property damage, assault, and civil harassment. Let's drag them into the sun. So we filed suit, official and public. I wanted damages, a restraining order, reimbursement for legal fees, and a full judicial confirmation that my property was not, has never been, and would never be under HOA jurisdiction. But as I should have expected by now, Karen wasn't going to go quietly. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from her attorney, the HOA's attorney, claiming that they were filing a countersuit against me. Their accusation? That I was intentionally disrupting community access to what they described as a long-standing communal use easement that the HOA had effectively maintained for over a decade. And the kicker, they attached a PowerPoint presentation. That's right, a full-on HOA slideshow extravaganza. Pages of grainy photographs showing residents parking near my lot at community barbecues, holiday events, even one where a kid was holding a balloon standing vaguely near the edge of my driveway, like that somehow proved legal ownership. One slide even included a timeline complete with bulleted points like 2012. Mr. Pearson's pontoon trailer rested on gravel for 36 hours. They submitted it to the court as evidence. I showed it to Gina. She nearly choked on her coffee. Are they trying to establish adverse possession with birthday party photos? Oh, it gets better, I said, flipping the page. Here's a slide titled Spirit of the Community. We prepared for court like it was a heavyweight title match. Gina subpoenaed drone footage, zoning records, county maps, and even the original subdivision plat, showing a clear boundary between my parcel and the HOA. She also hired a forensic document analyst because, get this, buried in the HOA's countersuit packet was a map they'd updated to show my gravel parking area shaded in HOA green. Only problem, they'd edited it poorly. The analyst confirmed that the original map had been tampered with digitally. Metadata revealed it had been modified just 2 weeks prior, well after I'd moved in. In short, Karen's team forged evidence. The court date finally came. The courtroom was packed. Local journalists, neighbors, even a few HOA members who'd been suspiciously absent during Karen's reign. I sat at the plaintiff's table, composed but ready to throw down, while Karen entered in a cream-colored pantsuit. Like she was walking into a garden club brunch. The judge, stern, gray-bearded, and clearly not a fan of nonsense, asked Karen's attorney to present their opening remarks. He clicked to the first slide of the PowerPoint. The judge blinked. Is that Comic Sans? Karen's lawyer stammered something about community impact. The judge turned to Gina. Counselor? She stood, cool as a glacier in pearls. Your Honor, we'll be presenting real evidence, starting with county tax records, recorded deeds, footage of trespassing, and proof of document forgery by the defense. From there, it was a slow-motion collapse for the HOA. Every time they tried to assert authority over my land, Gina had a document that ripped their claim in half. Every time they mentioned long-standing usage, we produced footage of me installing no trespassing signs within the first 48 hours of move-in. And when Gina unveiled the forged map, that courtroom went silent enough to hear Karen's social life implode. The judge didn't even need a recess. He dismissed the countersuit on the spot, called the forgery deeply troubling, and scheduled a separate hearing to explore sanctions against the HOA. Me? I walked out of that courthouse with a ruling in hand, a smirk on my face, and the distinct feeling that I'd just kicked over the queen's chessboard. Karen had made her move. I had just checkmated her. You'd think the sound of a judge's gavel would mark the end of a story like this, but in truth, the verdict was just the starting gun for the unraveling of everything Karen had built, and the rebuilding of something far better. Let's start with Karen. In the days following the court's decision, her name disappeared from HOA correspondence like it had been erased with a magic marker. Officially, she'd been relieved of duties pending review. Unofficially, she was dethroned. One day, she was issuing citations for lawn heights and mailbox colors. The next, she was spotted power walking at dawn, head down, dodging eye contact like it burned. Word spread fast. After all, she wasn't just ousted, she was disgraced. A few residents told me she tried to hold on, organizing a last-minute community meeting in her driveway with folding chairs and lemon water, but only 2 people showed up. One was her husband, the other thought it was a yard sale. And the cherry on top, an audit. The court's ruling triggered an internal HOA review. And guess what? The financial books weren't just messy, they were downright suspicious, funneling HOA fees into community enhancements that somehow translated to expensive patio furniture for the HOA office, a premium coffee machine, and landscaping services for Karen's own yard. She wasn't charged, at least not yet, but the whispers started. And in places like Lakeside Meadows, whispers are more destructive than lawsuits. As for her security team, let's talk about the goons. Turns out, neither of them were licensed. They weren't even part of a registered security firm. One was Karen's nephew. The other was a friend from her church group who used to bounce at a bar. Their uniforms bought online. Their authority? 0. But their charges? Very real. Both were booked for trespassing, unlawful detainment, and battery, and one of them, the red-faced clipboard wielder, tried to claim he was just following orders. Didn't work. The court sentenced them to community service and mandatory anger management classes, and the HOA was hit with a civil fine for using unlicensed personnel for enforcement. It gets better. Their punishment for the service hours? Cleaning up trash around the public boat ramp. On the opposite side of my lake. You couldn't script irony that good. Now, as for me, well, after the legal dust settled, things got quiet. A good kind of quiet. The kind that lets you hear the loons on the lake and the wind through the pines instead of HOA threats rustling in your mailbox. My wife and I planted sunflowers where the chain once hung. I built a new gate, wider, stronger, with a discreet camera just in case. But I haven't had to check it. No one trespasses anymore. No one dares. Even the neighborhood shifted. I got invited to barbecues, asked to join a fishing group. People I'd barely seen before the trial now waved, brought over pies, even thanked me for standing up to the madness. I didn't become a local hero, but maybe a symbol. That you don't have to be loud to be right. That one guy with a deed, a spine, and a damn good lawyer can bring down a petty empire. Karen lost her power. Her goons lost their playtime. And me? I got my land back. Along with something I hadn't expected, respect. It's funny how quickly peace settles in when tyranny packs its bags and sulks off into suburban obscurity. In the weeks following the court's ruling, the neighborhood felt lighter, literally and figuratively. It was like someone had opened a window and let the fresh air in. The tension that had clung to every mailbox and manicured lawn vanished right along with Karen's title. As for me, I made a trip to the hardware store and picked up a custom engraved sign. Nothing flashy, just a solid metal plaque mounted right where the HOA's chain used to hang. It read, "Private Property." If you're from the HOA, take a walk. If you're Karen, take a hike. Right below it, in smaller script, established 2023, undefeated since. I didn't just reclaim my land, I claimed the narrative. To celebrate, Samantha and I decided to host a little lakeside get-together. Nothing fancy. Just burgers, music, and the kind of neighborly bonding Karen had always claimed to promote, but never actually allowed. But then word got out. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees that Saturday evening, half the neighborhood was in my backyard. Someone brought a karaoke machine. A retired jazz guitarist set up near the gazebo. Bob from down the road brought enough pulled pork to feed a battalion. Kids ran along the dock with sparklers, and adults lounged on folding chairs sipping drinks, cracking jokes, and, not so subtly, cheering the fall of the old regime. At one point, someone fired up the mic and shouted, "Let's give it up for Andy, the only man to legally body slam the HOA and live to tell the tale." Laughter, applause. Even the security guy from the sheriff's department stopped by, off duty, to toast me with a red Solo cup and say, "Been watching this HOA for years. Wish more folks stood up to him like you did." The night ended with music, stars, and stories shared under string lights and mosquito candles. It felt right, like the neighborhood was finally becoming what it had always pretended to be, a community. And just when I thought the final chapter had been written, fate, ever the showman, delivered one last surprise. A week later, I was trimming hedges near the drive when a black sedan pulled up. The passenger door opened, and out stepped Karen. No sunglasses, no pearls, no clipboard, just a woman holding a Tupperware container like it was a white flag. I stood still. She cleared her throat. "I baked lemon squares," she said. "They're from a family recipe. No raisins." I stared. "I just wanted to apologize," she continued, eyes fixed on the gravel. "You were right. I let it go too far." I took the container, nodded, and offered the most honest thing I could muster. "They better be good." She almost smiled, and as she turned and walked back to the car, I couldn't help but wonder, maybe the real HOA victory wasn't just reclaiming my parking space. Maybe it was seeing a neighborhood rebuild itself from the ruins of control. One awkward lemon square at a time. I took a bite. They were excellent. Touche, Karen.